Okay, my book today is called My Grandmother's Journey. I was in bed already when my grandmother came in to say good night. She pulled off her black shoes and stretched her feet. She held them out and looked at them. Feet, she said, where haven't you been? What haven't we been through together? I liked it when she wiggled her toes and walked to her and talked to her feet. That's how she got comfortable. So, Corey, I think you're waiting for a story. I nodded. What shall it be? Your story, Grandma. Ah, now that's a tale full of twists and turns, like a path through the woods. I can hardly believe it myself, but my feet could tell you it's true. Let's see, how does it start? When you were a girl? Yes, on a cold day in December, when I was 7, it was the first time I saw the gypsies. The gypsies came through our village on their way south for winter in a caravan of wagons drawn by tied horses. I was standing by the gate to our house when I heard the jingling of harness bells. A man, a woman, and their little baby stopped and asked for water, which I ran to get. I begged my mother to let them stay the night with us. The baby cried and the snowflakes were falling. All right, she said, just this once. The young gypsy woman smiled and let me hold the baby. She said, she has a good heart, your daughter, said the woman to my mother, but I see that she is often ill. How did you know that? My mother asked. It was true. I had terrible headaches that nothing and no one could cure. Tonight is the first snow. It is a time of healing, the young gypsy replied. Let me try to help her. My mother agreed, wiping the tears from her eyes. The doctors in the village had all looked at me and given me medicines. Then they shook their heads, knitted their brows, and grew silent. After the young woman settled her baby for the night, she took me to a quiet corner of the room. She bathed my temples with water from the snowflakes that had fallen on the village. She sang to me in her calm, deep voice. The song was old, old. I did not know the words, but they were soft and sure and rocked me quietly with their sound. I glided through the snow clouds and past the moon to a garden where a river of sweet water ran gently through the grass and angels leaped in a bright blue sky. I leaned over to drink and I saw my own face smiling back at me. Next morning, the world was white with new snow. I woke to hear the gypsy wagon jingling out of town beyond the orchards. I jumped out of bed and pulled on my boots and ran after it. I have never ran so fast, felt so free and light. More than 10 years passed before another gypsy stopped at our house. It was spring, and the great meadow that lay on one side of the river was filled with pools of yellow butterflies. I was a young bride now and came home across the fields and orchards that day to find an old gypsy woman in the kitchen talking with my mother and some of her friends. She was reading their fortunes on their palms and in the tea leaves. Tell me, I said, smiling, when will I be married? Don't tease me, my girl, the gypsy replied. You already are. She was right. Your grandfather and I had just been married, but no one had told her. And since you are so keen to know your future, I will tell you, she went on. Today you turn up your nose at dark bread, but there will come a time when you will cry out for even a crust of bread. Today you are strong, but the time will come when you pray to endure one more hour. You are light on your feet and can dance all night, but there will come a time when every footstep will be pain. With that, she gathered her shawls around her and left us standing there astonished. Then the revolution came, and with it, civil war. People who had something suddenly had nothing. We lost our house, our land, our belongings, everything. Every chair, every blanket, right down to every last cup. The only shelter we could find was the shed where the chickens had lived, so we moved there. Farmers were yanked from their fields and sent to the army. The whites and the reds fought through the countryside, blasting the orchards and burning the wheat. I lost my father and my mother and 3 brothers who went to war and hunger that swept the land and to sickness that followed close behind. The gypsy was right. I dreamed about the bread, the smell of it baking in the house, tables covered with loaves, slices of bread with butter and jam. We tried escaping to freedom, but we had no papers to take us over the border, and no money to bribe our way across. We hid with friends and relatives in different cities until that became too dangerous. Then we traveled into the countryside where we tried to disappear like a tree would or a horse does. We found jobs on farms and in factories, making bricks and harvesting crops, doing whatever we could. Then came World War II. The enemy marched through our country and took everything, our animals, our crops, our young people. Again, we tried to escape to somewhere safe, but soldiers were everywhere, ours and theirs. Both would shoot you if they caught you, and they thought you might be a spy. We hid in a forest while the fighting raged around us. That's where your mother was born, by the banks of a river on a cold March day. When she slept in my arms, I remember thinking that there must still be angels. We made our way west across the ruined countryside. One night we stopped in a freezing rain outside a lonely farmhouse. We stood shivering, praying it would be safe to approach. We knew someone was living there because the smoke curled up from the chimney. In the end, we had to knock on the door. We could not endure the cold another moment. A small, thin man opened the door a crack and scowled at us. "Go away," he said. "We don't have anything." "Please," I pleaded. "We have a child, perhaps a little milk or a few minutes to get warm again." The man's face lit up. "A child? In this world?" We said goodbye and started walking, dodging the soldiers sleeping in the woods or wherever we could find a safe place. We carried your mother in our arms. She was one of the gifts of hope we'd had in all those days. Whenever anyone saw her, little miracles happened. Somehow, from nothing, there came a little something for her to eat, and a little bit more to keep us going. Once we were trying to find our way through the winding streets of a small city. I was barefoot by now, walking in pain. Out of an alleyway, a man suddenly appeared and quickly pressed a pair of shoes into my hands. "They were my wife's," he said. "She would have wanted you to have them." And then he was gone before I could thank him for his kindness. Your grandfather found what work he could as a carpenter, a stonemason, a gardener. He was a wizard with his hands. Once, in payment for fixing his roof, a man gave us an old baby buggy and some potatoes. We filled the buggy with your mother and our bundles, and we pushed it over the mountains. Your grandfather even sang as we went that day. His voice soared up the sides of the hills, and people working in the fields stood up to listen. We kept carrying our baby and walking west, always to the west, through what was left of our old world. The threatening enemy soldiers captured us and took us and thousands of others back to their country to work in their factories. And that was where we were when peace came. Your mother was a little girl like you when she finally sailed by the Statue of Liberty and stood for the first time in America. The gypsy told me many things, Corey, but she did not tell me that the rest of my fortune would be to survive and bring a child out of that place. She did not tell me that I would eat bread again in a warm house where I can rest my feet. These old friends that have carried me halfway around the world to you.